for their septic tanks is a way to look at this process. I wouldn't necessarily agree with scrapping Title V altogether, but modifying it and providing some kind of tax break for these folks who have trouble that 1 year where they have a huge financial burden to undertake is a way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones.
I think the record will show that I've supported those tax breaks, either as deductions or even tax credits, to allow those homeowners breaks when they have to do that. Many residents in North Reading and North Andover, and very few in Reading, have had a problem when they've gone to sell a home, and that's really what people have saved as their retirement, their equity in their home, and they've been hit with a 10, 15, 20, even up to a $30,000 improvement. And the record will show that we've done that. We have to look at also some sewering questions. We're looking at a sewering proposal on Concord Street in North Reading right now. There's some talk over in the Martins Pond area, which in the town of North Reading is the primary area where there's fundamental problems of even looking at a secondary or tertiary treatment system. We have to look at technology as best we can, and I think those things are roles that the state representative can play. Title V is unfortunately statutory regulations put forth by DEP, and people think they're terrible now. They were a lot worse before legislators such as myself intervened and tried to get them to understand the tremendous burden they were placing on citizens in areas.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines, 30 seconds.
Well, I'd just like to reiterate the fact that the record may show that Mr. Jones has been fighting for that is wonderful, but the point is when these people have these problems, you have to go out, you have to meet with them, you have to become intimate with their problems, you have to bring those problems back to the State House and try and help those people as best you can. That's the issue. That's becoming involved with your constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Feely, the next question, please, to Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, should tax incentives be given to businesses to either create or keep jobs in Massachusetts?
I think yes, if they're structured correctly, and I think that we'll see two main areas where we've done that. The mutual fund industry this past year and last year with the manufacturing industry, and I think we're already seeing the benefits from that. Fidelity's already, in fulfilling the commitment, going to be adding 1,000 employees. Raytheon right now is at the table, and next April we should hear on a $1.8 billion contract that will allow them to significantly augment their manufacturing components. And the only reason they're able to make that competitive bid is because they were able to work with the legislature in forging the single sales factor, which I think allows Massachusetts to be competitive. And that's what we're doing. We're competing with 49 other states to host businesses, to locate, to expand, and to stay here.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines.
I agree that in some points you have to grant tax breaks to businesses so that they can stay in Massachusetts, so that we can compete with 49 other states in the nation. But saying that, we can't go out and give away the store as far as tax breaks are concerned. We need to get concessions from these businesses to provide for the long-term viability of the state as far as tax revenue is concerned. When we talk about tax breaks for businesses, we often don't talk about how this is corporate welfare and how we need to reform that system as well, as we have tried to reform the welfare system for women and people that are on public assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones, 30 seconds.
Well, the people in the corporations that I'm concerned about are the people who live on Main Street in Reading that have a job maybe making $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, or $40,000 a year that may lose their job. Raytheon, for instance, supports 4,000 vendors in the Commonwealth. So the multiplier effect is staggering if Raytheon were to leave Massachusetts and have no manufacturing component here because defense procurement is down. For instance, with the mutual fund industry, they've made a commitment to add 5,000 jobs by the year 2002, and they're going to fulfill that commitment, or they don't get to take advantage of that tax break.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Feely, the next question, please, to Mr. Hines.
Okay, just to cover some general issues for people who haven't had an opportunity yet to meet and speak with you, what is your position on welfare reform?
Was that for me?
Yes.
Okay. My position on welfare reform is it needed to be reformed. The legislature, the democratically controlled legislature, reformed welfare and provided a system which is going to work. The problem we have to watch for is kids falling through the cracks of the system. There has to be a safety net for kids and for and single mothers. That is where we have to watch in welfare reform.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones.
I'm very proud to have been a member of the Merrimack Valley Caucus, which was the key moving factor behind welfare reform, which was a bipartisan effort, Mr. Hines. It wasn't simply a democratically controlled legislature. This was an issue that Democrats and Republicans across the state were hammering on the legislature to do, and we stepped forward and we did it, and we created a fundamental change in creating personal accountability, personal responsibility, and it's a tough reform law that other states have modeled, and even the federal government has finally stepped to the plate and passed welfare reform. And we do have to monitor it and come back and look at it every year and say, what has worked, what hasn't worked, because what we want is a system that works, that helps people up who have temporary needs, helps them up, helps them get their educational needs or health care or whatever the case may be, but isn't a lifestyle alternative, and doesn't create a cycle of dependency that goes on for generation after generation.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines, 30 seconds.
I'm glad Brad agrees with me that we have to look at welfare reform every year and make sure that kids aren't falling through the cracks. It's very important that the safety net remains, and these people don't have to go on the streets and become hungry or lose the housing or lose any other benefits that are involved with welfare. And I agree, it doesn't have to be a lifestyle choice. But that being said, it can't be taken away from these folks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Feely, the next question, please, to Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, what is your position on the issue of creating charter schools?
I've supported charter schools in the past, and as I said in the interview with the Reading Chronicle, I think we have to wait a few more years to see what the experience is. We have a cap right now. I don't support expanding that cap, but I think it's a legitimate experiment to undertake in this day and age where generally the public feels, and I think the statistics show, that public school system has not achieved the level of success that we need in the society today, and I think this is a creative alternative to look at, to see if there's another alternative that we can do to meet the needs of the children. And that's what public education is about. It's not teachers or principals or administrators. It's about educating children.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines.
I don't support that concept at all. What I do support is more public money for public schools. Public school system in this country is one of the greatest institutions ever created, and I think that we need to expand and provide for that institution to grow and to become more viable over the next century and into the 21st century. It's very important that we provide the best quality education we can for the children of this district, and I believe that's through the public school system.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones, 30 seconds.
Well, I'm glad Mr. Hines agrees with me, and that's why I voted for the higher ed technology bond bill, the higher ed infrastructure, the educational technology bond bill, to get technology, additional money for school building assistance, and we fully funded education reform time after time after time. And that's a commitment we're going to do. And if there's a budget on the floor that doesn't fully fund education reform, I'm not going to vote for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Feely, the next question, please, to Mr. Hines.
Mr. Hines, there have been a number of hearings lately on the issue of county government. How do you feel about this issue? Are you for or against it, and why?
I believe we need to phase county government out of existence. It's served its purpose, and it's time to move on. The need for the county government isn't there anymore, and I believe that if we phase it out over a period of years, we can minimize any disruption to services that might be out there now and have it taken over by the state.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr.
I'm
Jones.
glad Mr. Hines agrees with my long-held position that county government does not serve a purpose like it does in other states in Massachusetts, and the functions that it does perform can be phased out, and I don't think it takes a number of years. I think it can be done within a couple or 2 or 3 years and phased out. I think the county corrections can easily put in with the Department of Corrections, and the deeds issues in this and that can be easily merged.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines, 30 seconds.
I'm glad Brad also agrees with me. I'm glad we agree on this issue. It's a pretty fundamental issue, and I don't think there's many people that would disagree with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Feely, your next question, please, to Mr. Jones.
Okay, this is another question from the North Reading transcript. As state rep, what would you do to assure that the concerns of the community are taken into consideration when determining future uses for the J.T. Berry Center?
Well, I think that's why we've appointed a reuse committee to analyze that issue and look at it and come up with a proposal. Right now, the Division of Capital Planning and Operations is offering up a plan to go out and take RFPs from private entities to see if they'd like to purchase or set it up. So that's a process that's underway and working, and that's a key role for the state representative, and one that I've been actively involved in as a selectman. I was one of the people that appointed that committee and been working, and we've had groups out there. We've toured the facility. We've brought people in, private vendors, private groups to look at it. We've even had the film industry in looking at it as making it a soundstage and utilizing it in that vein. So there's a key role for the state representative to play.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines.
Yes, there is a key role for the state representative to play, not only at J.T. Berry, but across the entire district. When land like this comes available, we must always look at it and see what the best use for the community and the town as a whole. I was at a meeting at North Reading about that, and I sat through a presentation about the film industry. I thought it was a very creative idea that was set forth.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones, 30 seconds.
Yes, and I think I'm glad Mr. Hines agrees with me that there's a role for the state representative to play, and I think each community has to determine what it wants to see the land used for, and I think the state representative can serve as a conduit for information, for opportunities, avenues. The J.T. Berry, one of the things I've done as a legislative aide and state representative was get 14 acres of land transferred that the town can use for watershed protection and recreational land, and I also know that there was an issue of prisons being looked at in 2 towns, and as state representative we were able to prevent that from coming to fruition in either Reading or North Reading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Feely, your next question, please, to Mr. Hines.
Mr. Hines, what is your position on creating new prisons and more cells in the state?
Well, I have an interesting proposal on that. I don't necessarily believe that we need to create new prisons, but what we do need is to stop overcrowding on the current prison system. And by doing that, and a way to do that would be to create a new sentence called guilty but deported. So when there's illegal immigrants having criminal careers in our state, instead of housing them and keeping them here in Massachusetts for the rest of their lives, if we should deport them to their countries and send them back to where they belong because they're here illegally. And I think that would lessen some of the crowding issues that we have in our state prison system.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones.
I think it's amazing that my opponent doesn't support the expansion of more prison cells in the state. The prison system in Massachusetts is bursting at the seams. And if we're really going to get serious about crime and sending a message that you're going to get caught, convicted, and sentenced and have a real sentence to serve, we need the space to house these people. And it may be all well and good to deport convicted illegal immigrants, but believe me, that's not even going to be a drop in the bucket to the problem. And the issue is a number of communities are willing to accept expansions of prisons. Lancaster and Shirley and Gardner and Bridgewater. All they're asking for from the state is a little recognition and a little bit of mitigation by way of recognizing that they host those facilities to the benefit of the entire state. And I think that's a small price to pay for housing the people that have just shown that they can't live within the rules of society.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Hines, 30 seconds.
It is also amazing that we don't look at reforming sentencing bills in this state. And if we realize that maybe some of the people that are in prison are nonviolent, non-career criminals that may not necessarily need to be in prison, and that might reduce the system overcrowding. And also, I think we need to seriously look at that proposal about being guilty but deported.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Feely, please, your next question to Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, just as a follow-up to the prison issue, what are your thoughts on the death penalty?
I'm a supporter of the death penalty. I have voted in favor of the death penalty on 2 occasions when it's come up for a vote in the legislature. I'm pleased that the legislature finally stepped forward after letting this issue languish and fulfilled its responsibility to have a debate, and I can honestly say it was one of the best debates that the legislature had. Very emotional, but it was done in a professional manner, and the issue lost both times in the House. So be it. We stepped forward and voted on the issue, and if I have the opportunity again, I will vote in favor of the death penalty as proposed by the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And Mr. Hines.
I also support the death penalty. I do have, some issues with it. I think we need to watch the process and make sure that it's fair and equitable, and it has historically been racially imbalanced. And I think we need to have a serious look at the death penalty and provide, provide for the system to be looked at every once in a while, so that we know that the system is working and we're not just having a vengeful death penalty.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Jones, 30
I'm
seconds.
very pleased that Mr. Hines has finally come to be a supporter of the death penalty, because I remember a night that he came down to the district office of Representative Rob Krikorian with several other members, Mr. Hancock and Mrs. Soley, Mr. Kennedy, to lobby the then Representative Krikorian to not support the death penalty, to change his view. And I'm glad he's come about to seeing it as a legitimate response to certain crimes in our society.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Feely, your next question, please, to Mr. Hines.
Mr. Hines, a very big issue in Reading at the moment is the situation downtown, trying to bring new businesses into the area. What do you feel the role of the state rep should be in helping the town to bring new businesses here, and what could the state rep do?
State rep should be conduit to the business community as far as economic development is concerned in the square in Reading. as you know, if you drive through there now, there's a lot of empty buildings, and we need to get tenants, we need to help